Hello, everyone. Welcome to JMac Investing. My name is Jason. Got a couple special guests today. We have Brett Adcock, who is the co-founder and CEO of Archer Aviation on the left, and Adam Goldstein, who's also the co-founder and co-CEO of Archer Aviation. Real pleasure to have you gentlemen on today. How you all doing?
Thank you, Jason. We're doing great. Thanks for having us here.
Absolutely. Yeah, a real treat. I was expecting just to have you on, Brett, but you surprised me bringing Adam, so really cool.
Yeah, got some firepower here, so we're excited to be here.
Yeah. So well, I guess you guys and your company, the eVTOL industry, it's all brand new, right? So not I think this is probably going to garner a lot of attention. This video and this interview. So I want to give you the opportunity to just give some backdrop on you guys' experience. And then what led you to enter into this endeavor with the eVTOL?
Yeah, sure. So great question. So I feel like, so Adam and I have been building businesses for the last 15 years together. And, over the last 20 years, you've seen like tremendous advancements in electric power systems, batteries, electric motors. It's been this incredible revolution. And those technologies have gotten good enough now to move from on the ground and into the air. And so what we're doing here at Archer is building electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft used for urban air mobility. So there's been this incredible step change in technology that allowed for fully electric aircraft. And when you make that move to electric, you get an incredible amount of benefits. A few of those are, one is you can produce a low-cost aircraft, low cost to build and low cost to operate versus say a traditional helicopter or airplane. Two is you can make the aircraft extremely safe. So our aircraft has 12 electric motors and 6 independent battery packs. So we could theoretically lose motors and batteries in flight and still fly very safely. And that compares to like say a helicopter that could have like a few hundred critical components, where if those components fail, there'd be a catastrophic event. Third is noise. So our aircraft we're designing to is designed to be 100 times quieter than a helicopter at 2,000 feet above ground level. So you have this incredible technology step change that allows you to create an aircraft that is low cost, high safety, and low noise. And we think that kind of revolutionizes the way people travel kind of in and around cities. So the first step for us is we feel like there's 50,000 helicopters here in the world. We think over time, over the next couple of decades, a large majority of those be replaced with electric aircrafts like this. And the second is, if you can create a transportation solution that can move folks, say, off the ground where we're stuck in traffic and it's really hard to scale roads and bridges and tunnels, and move them to the air where you can travel 150 miles an hour, point to point. And you can do that, say, affordably and safely, and also low noise for the cities. Like we think that produces kind of a new form of travel that folks can start taking kind of inside of cities and beyond. And that's what we really get excited about long term, is how do we move as much of this traffic, say, off the ground into the air. And a big benefit as well is it's fully sustainable, so zero emissions aircraft. And that's a business we think can be multiple trillions over the next couple of decades, and we've set out for, and we get really excited about. But maybe I'll hand it over to Adam and maybe we can talk a little bit about United and some of the recent developments here at Archer.
I think, as Brett said, you take a step back and you're trying to understand sort of the evolution of this industry. And, a lot of people talk about flying cars or, some kind of crazy version of this, but it's actually, it's a pretty practical solution. So you have these vehicles now that are much safer, much quieter, much lower cost. And it's just sort of this natural step change that you're seeing take place where these vehicles, will likely to start taking the place, of helicopters and likely start expanding this concept of urban travel, urban air mobility. And so United was a really interesting partnership for us. And so we took a step back and said, okay, what's our best path to market here? And who are the groups that we'd want to partner with? And, how should we think about, the long-term vision of this? And so United on one front wants to be a leader in decarbonization. They want to get a foothold in the urban air mobility market, which has this potential to be this huge, enormous multi-trillion-dollar market. And it was a really great partnership because it allowed us to really team up with a group that has extensive experience in operations, extensive experience in maintenance, and even helping us facilitate our roadmap. So things like getting through certification faster, helping us think through, some of the operational elements of our business. So they were a really great partner for us. I think also not just relating to Archer, but really a validating kind of point for the entire industry. And a third party that's obviously highly credible saying the technology here is actually at the point where it can be commercialized. And so I think that was like a really big sort of wake up call to the world saying, this is the time where this market is actually, going to come alive. And so, that's why we're really excited to partner with them.
Yeah, it's very interesting to go over the slide deck and see the other players in the industry and the fact that none have any major contracted deals like you guys do. So, so definitely, I guess I also should caveat and also say that, full disclaimer, I am invested into Archer, into the SPAC right now. But my full disclaimer will be in the video description below. But I'm for sure excited about the industry, excited about you guys and what the future holds with the potential here, So I think because some of the naysayers or the negative comments that you get are, this is too far out, things of that nature. But do you want to invest in today and yesterday, or do you want to invest in the future? So I think this is why you guys are, going to likely do well, and why I'm interested, and why I think a lot of investors are interested, because we want to invest in the future trends, not today. So
maybe I can tell you a quick story about the industry too. And so I think your comments are a really familiar set of this kind of cycle that I think everyone goes through when they approach this industry, and probably a lot of emerging industries. So I think the first concept, that people think about is, oh gosh, this is going to be crazy. There's going to be thousands of planes flying over my head. And I think that's sort of like that's like the end point. That's like an end state of 20, 30, 40 years of what happens. And so I think if we take a step back and understand what's happened, you've had these big advancements in electric powertrains. So batteries and electric motors, they've really advanced far. And there's been billions of dollars that have been poured in on the EV side, right? On the ground side of things. And so we can thank Elon and the rest of the folks that have been out there advancing, these technologies. And so Brett and I had a similar level of skepticism. We were excited about it, but when we started exploring the technology many years ago, what we really started to realize was, oh, wow, the industry actually is at a point where we don't need any new technology, meaning we don't need any advances in batteries. We don't need any advances in motors from here to build an economically viable business. And so this is not like, autonomous cars, which still is waiting for, science breakthroughs. This is not like, some of these, future battery companies, which are very dependent on science breakthroughs. We do not need any new technology here. These vehicles have been flying around the Bay Area out here for the past 10 years. And they're at a point where now we can actually bring them to market. So the vehicle that we talk about, flying 60 miles at the end of its battery life and including reserves, is all based on today's technology. So I think that's like a really big one to really understand here, that, this actually is not some far out thing, and that, you will see these vehicles out there flying. The FAA even talks about it. So there's a great video by Jay Merkel from the FAA, who's out there saying, look, everybody, this is not promotional videos. This is not marketing hype. There are, what he says in the video, six companies that have planes that are in the type certification process, and they're working on operations and integrating these vehicles into the airspace. So it's much further ahead than I think people understand. And over the next several years, we'll start to see these vehicles, come to market.
But there is still, though, a little bit of a level of, there are some regulations that are going to have to also come along, right, to pave the way. That sounds like it's being set up, but isn't that the case, though?
So the aircraft we're designing is a fully piloted aircraft, and there are no certification rules. We're waiting to certify it today. So there's this multiple level step here that we'll take, and the FAA and the air traffic control will take over the next 10, 15 years to move, say, to an autonomous airspace and other levels of future travel. But today we're certifying our aircraft piloted into the traditional air traffic control airspace that exists today. There's already urban air mobility today. It's helicopters. They fly around New York every single day. And so we are certifying our aircraft to Part 23 rules, which is a normal kind of airplane certification rules at the FAA. We have about 50 people at the FAA working on our project, and we're now entering the execution phase of that, where we're basically working towards a certain date with FAA on certifying our aircraft and entering operations. So there's no breakthroughs either on the technology side, as Adam mentioned, or the certification side that we're waiting for. It's just now a time game for us to execute and bring to market. So I think it's kind of the point Adam's trying to make is some folks might look at this and say, wow, it's future far out technology. Maybe it's just 10 years out. It's not. It's the next 3 years. And most of that time is going to be spent on certifying the aircraft with FAA, making it just as safe as commercial airlines today.
Okay, wow, yeah, that's big news, because I thought there was maybe a level of regulation that needed to be that needed to take place. So that's great. That's another maybe level of some doubt that people had. That thank you for clarifying that.
It's even better though too. We don't need any additional infrastructure either to get going. So if you think about, again, there's 50,000 helicopters out there. So you can certify a helicopter, you can certify an airplane. They just take time. They'll typically take you about 3 years to get through the process. And we're in that process right now. But like Brett said, no additional rules, but also no additional infrastructure. So just think about the helicopter market. 50,000 helicopters globally, something like 10 to 15,000 in the US. A helicopter will cost you around $10 million. So you have globally like a $500 billion or $500 billion replacement cycle that will just take place, which you'll see today. Again, nothing new needs to happen. No new infrastructure, no new regulation, no new tech.
That's great. That's really, really, really big, I guess, for you guys moving forward with your plans here. I wanted to talk about the aircraft itself, because it seems like there was really, really when we got the slide deck, when investors got the slide deck, that was really the first kind of information that came public. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were largely operating behind a closed door for the last 3 years. And so this was the first time we talked more openly about the aircraft configuration, some of the architecture choices that we've made, and other decisions.
Very good. Very good.
I think if I can add one thing in there too. So if you look at the history of the industry, right? So the industry started 10 years ago, basically with Larry Page, right? He was the one who kind of said, look, I want to bring an electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. And he started a company, which was originally called Z Aero. And so, which kind of was gone through several name changes and now is called Wisk. And so Tom Muniz, who runs our engineering, came from Wisk. So he spent over 10 years, been through multiple different vehicles. So this is his 6th full-scale plane that he's built. So we're talking like cycles have been gone through, lots of money and time and technology to get us to where we are today, where the Archer vehicle that we've worked on really has taken a lot of the generic kind of learnings over the years to create a vehicle that's as simple as possible in order to get through certification and in order to be mass manufactured, but while still being able to hit the performance needed for urban air mobility, meaning it still needs to have, at least, this type of range and payload capabilities in order to make it make sense, right? So that's one of the biggest differences, I think, in, the Archer vehicle versus some of the other competitor vehicles out there, which is this is a vehicle that was designed from the very beginning to think about certification and mass manufacturing.
Very good. Very good. You guys touched a little bit on the total addressable market. And I know Morgan Stanley did their research on it, that it was could be anywhere between 1.5 trillion to 3. Is that right? 1.5 to 3, something like that. So for going from where we are today, where there's really very little revenue coming into it, to get to that, I think it was by 2040. What does that evolution look like? What do you guys, since you guys are kind of pioneers of the industry here, along with a couple other players, where does all those revenue streams come from? What does it look like to get to that much revenue coming into this industry, which is very exciting for investors?
Yeah. So when I take a step back and look at the industry, we think of this as probably the next couple of decades, one of the largest emerging markets we've ever witnessed. And there'll be a few phases we'll go through as an industry. The last 10 years have basically been a giant R&D phase. So Larry Page set up a company that's now called Wisk 10 years ago, spent 10 years building 5 different full-scale eVTOL aircraft. A lot of our team came from Airbus, where they were working on eVTOL work for the last 5 or 6 years. So a lot of time and energy was spent trying to figure out how to make this work from a technology perspective. And that's all largely matured. So these aircrafts we're flying every week are flying out here in California, across the world. The technology's been fully demonstrated, and now the certification rules have been put in place. The FAA made a big change in 2017 to Part 23 to certify aircrafts like this in a performance-based manner. And we're currently, working really hard for that process. to hit our 2024 timeline to bring this aircraft to market. The phase we're entering right now is basically largely the go-to-market phase for urban air mobility. So we think a few players will emerge as players that have the right capital needs to get to market, which are very expensive and capital intensive business, have the right team that knows really what they're doing and think about the aircraft design, software, hardware, aerodynamic coupling, all the hard things that are important here from a design perspective. And then ultimately have an aircraft that can get the right performance for the business case. So can you have an aircraft that can be designed for, say, certification and manufacturing? You have aircraft that can go far enough and say fast enough to save people time, carry enough payload to make enough money, and be low enough noise to scale that properly into cities. We think Archer has all combinations of that to bring to market this decade. We will be using existing infrastructure and processes for the most part this phase. So existing helicopter landing sites, retrofitted land parcels, even airports that are underutilized and will be entering operations in 2024 in some select cities here in the US that have like big transportation issues. We'll also be taking deliveries from a, say, a revenue perspective to United Airlines that purchased $1 billion worth of aircraft that we announced last week. There's also an option for another $500 million order from them over the next coming years. So quite a large purchase. And as you mentioned before, it's the only company in the industry that has a contract like this and any significant value. And then as we look to the future, we get really excited about how do we think about our autonomous roadmap? How do we think about scale manufacturing? How do we produce 50, 100,000 vehicles a year? We announced earlier this quarter a partnership with Solantis, which is the merger with Fiat Chrysler and Peugeot to become the third largest by revenue and the fourth largest by volumes in the world. We're working with them on high volume composite manufacturing and also have access to the supply chain. So how do we produce aircraft at scale, which is really important. And then lastly is infrastructure. How do we think about infrastructure at scale inside of cities and beyond? But largely this decade here for us, we'll be working with our select partners on delivering aircrafts and starting operations here in a few cities. We think over the next couple of decades, this is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And you look at the different market segments, you have folks interested in the commercial airline industry. So obviously like the United of the world and other groups. You have significant cargo and logistics operations that we think are really interesting long-term, and also military and defense. So the US military in particular has been very interested in this technology as they look to electrify their fleet of helicopters and also drive down costs on different, like say, resupply missions and elsewhere. So we think there's a tremendous amount of interest in, to call it like electrifying aviation in the air. And so we think, as Adam alluded to a minute ago, there's 50,000 helicopters in the world. A large chunk of that will be electrified over time. And then ultimately, we think this new form of transportation can be taken, say from like New York to JFK in 10 minutes for $50, or places in LA that you couldn't otherwise drive an hour for, you can get there in 15 minutes. San Francisco, Dallas, Orlando, Miami, like there's a tremendous amount of, I think every city in the world will have a solution like this. And this will be, ultimately a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity over the next couple of decades.
Excellent. Yeah, I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for about 7 years, which is like Houston and LA and Atlanta. Like, everyone commutes and drives themselves, and the infrastructure is not in place for, really like public transportation that well. So yeah, it totally makes sense because I lived 8 miles from work, and it always took me 45 minutes to get to work. So this solution,
if you think about it, Jason, like we in half the world lives in cities today. The UN says 70% of the world will live in cities by 2050. So you have like a tremendous amount of people living in cities now across the world. We live in 3 dimensions. We go to the office, it's the 3-dimensional. We live in apartments and skyscrapers. But the road infrastructure is just 2-dimensional, and it just takes too long to scale, too much money. It's just it's gotten to a point where it's led to unprecedented traffic congestion. And there's a really great fix. There's a 3rd dimension we can move into and move 150 miles an hour with no traffic and no construction. And we think it make it really affordable, also sustainable and safe. And we think that's moving into the air. And we hope to kind of pioneer that. So the 45-minute trip to the office that you're taking and drives you're doing, let's make that 20 minutes door to door, and let's make that affordable for folks. Let's make it low noise over cities, and let's make it really safe, like safer than driving a car. And that's the solution that we think moving to say electric VTOL enables. And we believe Archer will be the first to market here and one of the market leaders worldwide. And that's the area we get really excited about longer term is, we think this is a solution needed for every city around the world.
So it looks like you guys is along your timeline. Looks like you're aiming to have a manufacturing facility open by 2022. Has a location been pinned down for that, or is that something we got to wait on to hear the news for that?
Yeah, so the way we think about manufacturing is we think about it in kind of two stages. So there's the, we'll call it the go-to-market stage, where we will use traditional aerospace techniques in manufacturing. So today it's pretty well understood how to build 400, 500, 600 planes a year, right? There's a lot of companies out there that do that, Piper, Cessna, Cirrus, there's a bunch of these kind of small aerospace manufacturers that do that. And so, we think about our first stage of go-to-market will be, this lower volume stage of manufacturing. But at the same time, we're working on high volume, automated solutions. So that's what a lot of the partnership with Solantis is about, is really starting to explore like the different types of materials that we should be using. How do we think about robotic automation? How do we think about, product line setup in these facilities? And so the ultimate goal is to figure out how to mass manufacture these vehicles. So we're, producing 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 vehicles per year. Now we don't estimate that, in any of our numbers that we're gonna get there, in this decade. But that's the work that we're doing, and frankly, a lot of the industry is doing, is trying to figure this out. And we think the autos are really great partners, right? So if you think about like, Fiat Chrysler, every Jeep that rolls off their line has a carbon fiber roof, for example. So they've been doing high volume composite manufacturing for a long time. So there's a lot of lessons there that are understood. Now the question is, okay, how do we conform some of those techniques towards aviation, where you need to certify, all the different parts? So that's a lot of the studies we'll spend over the next 10 years. So in the near term, we will be doing our more traditional, volume aerospace manufacturing in California. And over the long term, our high volume manufacturing facilities, we will do most likely outside of California. That site has not been selected yet. But that is something we are actively working on and looking at. There's a lot of considerations there, right? So you want to find a place that has a deep labor force, right? So we're going to be hiring thousands of people, and so you'll want to find a place that has skilled labor. You'll want to find a place that has you'll be manufacturing on an airport somewhere, right? So you can test flight much easier. So there's lots of considerations that go into that. So we started that process for the high volume manufacturing as well, but our site has not been selected yet.
So the Stellantis partnership, I can see how it's beneficial to you guys, but what is the value add to them in the partnership?
Yeah, it's great. So you think about it from their side of things, like every automobile OEM in the world, there's a few things going on. One is a lot of these groups are trying to get into other areas of mobility overall in their business lines. Two is they're electrifying their entire fleet. So you're seeing, almost every auto group in the world has a plan now for fully electrifying or moving fully to electric over the next 10, 15 years. And so we're seeing this huge move to electrification across every major auto in the world. And I think three is their main core competency, a lot of these autos is manufacturing. They do it better than anybody else in the world, as Adam alluded to. As we look at our business and even in aerospace has always been done in low volumes, 500, 1,000. You have to kind of go back to World War II, where we're producing a few 100,000 aircrafts per year. But beyond that, most of this stuff is done in low volumes. And as we think through the longer term vision, we need to be making, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of aircrafts per year. We have to be adopting more, say, automotive grade techniques for manufacturing processes and mass manufacturing. And so that's where the autos play a big part here. And I guess our deal with Stellantis. And so from a Stellantis side, they're electrifying their entire fleet. They're interested in other areas of mobility and autonomy. And this is in some ways replacing congestion on the ground, replacing traffic on the ground and trips that people are taking in a car and moving to the air. So we think it's a new form of mobility that is kind of blending a lot of this move in electrification that's happening on the ground with obviously aerial mobility, which is really exciting. And from the Stellantis side, they were really excited to be a part of this new industry of urban air mobility, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity to be involved in thinking through how do we manufacture at scale. And how do we help, Archer with, say, our supply chain? So they're obviously, talking to the same battery vendors we're talking to, and electric motor providers, and just different parts in the aircraft over time can look similar as it relates to the interior. We have seats and seat belts and door handles, and some of those could be certified long term. and be curated through the low-cost automotive-grade supply chain that Solantis offers. So we think for both sides, it's a huge win. They get to partner with like one of the leading groups in the space here to help us come to market, help us think through manufacturing, overall just help accelerate a timeline to market. And for us, we get to partner with basically one of the largest autos in the world that has experience from low volume manufacturing all the way up to high volume manufacturing, and think through this bigger challenge for us, which is how do we manufacture at scale over the next 20 years. And so we couldn't be more excited. We've been working with Fiat Chrysler, the group out of Detroit, for the last year. They helped design some of the interior of the aircraft that's in our lab right now, going through final assembly. We have a lot of parts on the aircraft that have come from the Fiat supply chain. And then obviously with the merger with Peugeot to become Solantis, they became investors here recently through the de-SPACing process. And we have a high conviction there's a lot to do together longer term to help Archer out and also help Solantis get a foothold in this new emerging space.
There you go. Yeah, you hit on it. Investors, so they're also invested. So they definitely want to see you guys make it for sure, and assist, I'm sure. So I wanted to ask you this. This is for my crowd and for investors alike that want to see you guys succeed long term. So once we de-SPAC and we begin to follow along your story because you're pre-revenue, what should we be keying in on once we begin to have quarterly earnings reports? What should we be looking for during the pre-revenue phase to say that the progress is being made?
It's a good question. So it's interesting. We've tried to set the stage that this is a long journey, right? And that this isn't going to be like a typical quarterly earnings, type of, company where, we're beating on revenue, we're beating on earnings by a couple pennies here or there, and it's moving the stock. I think what we're trying to show here is that there's this breakthrough technology that's allowed for this big advancement that's frankly good for society. It's the world I think we all want to live on, right? Nobody wants to sit there in traffic for 90 minutes. It's not a very good use of anybody's time. And so, I think we're trying to show that, that world that exists. And so then the question is just the incremental data points that, show that, we're closer to that becoming a reality. So there'll be things to talk about like certification, hurdles that we get over, different technology advancements, right? And demonstrating some of the technologies, different, potential locations where we'll go to market, things like that. So I think, you're largely basically looking at, different factors that will help sort of demonstrate to the world that we are closer to coming to market. And so I think that's like a good way to think about it. But our goal is to make sure people aren't really necessarily focused on just pure quarter to quarter type of stuff, but understand the long-term vision and that, the world that I think we all want to live in is getting closer to becoming a reality.
Yeah, I think maybe at Adam's point, it's like, we need to think through manufacturing, we need to think through certification, and we need to think through technology. And those are the big areas that will be demonstrated over the next 3 or 4 years. We're coming to market and showing the world like we're making progress in those areas. That helps show like a linear path that folks can really understand that we're going to be able to hit these vehicles, going to work and get certified. We can manufacture at scale and we can produce ultimately great service to customers. And those over the coming quarters and coming years is what we want to be demonstrating in the world and showing. And I think as Adam mentioned, we want to kind of draw a straight line through that and figure out a way to communicate that accurately over the next 3 to 4 years as we get to market.
Yeah, very good, very good. I know Virgin Galactic will be a good example of how to approach it, but I just wanted to get a perspective from you guys for investors as that time approaches. Well, it looks like we're probably a little bit beyond the 30 minutes that you guys had scheduled and I had scheduled here. So I just really want to first thank both of you for joining because, like I said, I thought it was just going to be Brett. So this was a real treat to have you guys on the show. And so, like I said, I am invested, so I'm right along the journey and looking forward to hearing updates and staying right along for the ride. So thanks for coming on. Any last words?
I know. We appreciate you having us here and taking a bet on us. And, listen, Adam and I have been doing this for 15 years, building businesses together. And we're here for the long run to build a huge business. It's going to take some time. We're looking for great supporters here for this journey. We think we have one of the best teams in the world. We couldn't be more excited about. We have a good amount of investors backing us here to get all the capital we need to get to market. We We have great supporters like Solantis. We have $1 billion order with United. So we couldn't be happier about the setup here. And over the coming years, we look forward to kind of demonstrating our capabilities that, Archer is going to be a leader in the space, and that we can ultimately help move the world towards a zero emissions future and help fix a lot of these transportation issues on the ground. But I appreciate you having us on.
Sounds great.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Thanks, guys.